What's going on, YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review slash knife overview to do with you guys. One that, like every other knife related channel has looked at, except for me, so I'm late to the game, sorry. That is oftentimes the case, though. This is the TRM, or Three Rivers Manufacturing Atom. I mistakenly called this the Neutron in the unboxing, and sorry about that. But yeah, this is a very compelling knife. Lots of interesting things about it. Can't wait to talk about it. This knife was, to my knowledge, it was sent to our pass-around group, our Apex pass-around group, by the manufacturers, TRM themselves. So, like usual, I'll try not to let that affect my review, but it should be pretty easy because I don't get to keep this. It's just going to go right on to the next reviewer. If you are new to my channel, I do have Patreon. Whether you're new or you've been around for a while, I do have Patreon. So if you'd like to support this channel and get your hands on one of these cool stickers, you can follow the link down in the description of my Patreon and have a look around. There is, of course, Patreon exclusive content that all patrons have access to at all tiers, even the $1 tier. So if that sounds interesting to you, the support would mean the world to me. Let's go ahead and get a measurement here. The overall length of the TRM Atom coming in at just a hair over 8 inches. I'm not going to call it 8 1/4. I'm going to call it like 8.1, 8.15. From tip to scale, you're looking at about 3.5 inches of blade. Cutting edge, you're looking at almost exactly 3 1/4. Now there is a smaller one, the TRM Neutron. That one's got a 3-inch blade and is 7 inches overall. So just keep in mind, if you like the look of this, but you're like, yeah, it's a little big or it's not legal in my area, they do have a smaller one. Let's go ahead and do some size comparisons here. How about up against the Ontario Rat Model 1? Rat 1 is coming in at 8.6 inches overall. So you can see there's just a little bit longer. How about up against the Spyderco PM2? Spyderco PM2 coming in at 8.3 inches overall. Again, just a little bit longer there. How about up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue? Ritter Hogue coming in at 8 inches overall. So just about exactly the same length there. So if you're a fan of the full-size Benchmade Griptilian, this is going to be right there in your wheelhouse. How about up against the Spyderco Para 3? Para 3 coming in at 7 1/4 inches overall. How about carry profile? Well, I'll tell you right now, the carry profile is darn near perfect. It's incredibly thin. Here it is up against the Spyderco Para 3. You can see there it's actually even thinner than the Para 3. And of course, in terms of height, up against these two, yeah, super duper easy. Even up against knives that are notorious for being a little bit easier to carry, the Benchmade Griptilian and the Ontario Rat, you can see there it's just better all the way around. This thing is thin, it's light, it's going to be very, very easy to pocket, and the smaller one's going to even be easier. Let's go ahead and give you guys an example of the action here. So on the inside, where's my flashlight? On the inside, we are working with, if we can see, phosphor bronze. So that's awesome. You guys saw on the unboxing, the action is fantastic, but it's largely due to the maker's knowledge of, a blade that it's really thin. So there's not a lot of mass in the blade. The relationship between the pivot, the mass of the blade, and the position of this stud. You can see there's no real traction point on the stud. So it doesn't rely on traction. In my opinion, it's just positioning. The scallop is just perfect. Where the handle braces on, I mean, like, this is seriously, whether you're doing, well, the reverse flick's not quite as easy because there's not as much traction back there. But this way, super easy, right? No traction and there's no real scallop. So even if I wanted to use my fingernail, either way, it's kind of difficult. This is one of the only knives that I've not really been able to do that with on camera. But that does not define a knife for me, right? To be able to do some sort of fidgety, tricky, the only knives that I prefer to deploy that way are Spyderco knives. I find them easier to deploy than with the thumb method, but this is the thumb stud opener, right? So I'm going to be using my thumb 99.9% of the time, and it does that flawlessly. This is one of the best thumb stud deployers that I've ever felt. I think the relationship with everything there, how they've got it set up, is just perfect. So what are we looking at for materials? We're looking at G10, and on the inside you can see there are countersunk liners. Let me get the flashlight again. I always lose that thing. On the inside you can see there are liners and liners, which is going to help with weight reduction here. Let's go ahead and weigh it. Not a lot of material. In fact, let me go ahead and give you guys an example of thickness here, because the blade is super thin. Super duper thin. Yeah. 90 thousandths. Not a lot. Not a lot of material. Overall weight coming in just over 3 ounces. Fantastic. You know, I have not met or talked with a lot of people who are like, I don't know, 3 ounces is on the heavy side. I mean, you know, there are people who just swear by the bug out and are like, that 1.8 ounces, but, you know, what is it that you're doing where the difference between 1.85 ounces and 3.1 ounces makes that much of a difference? Not too many scenarios out there. My point is considering how much blade you have and how much knife you get for 3.1 ounces, there's no argument to be had there. I mean, I'm just perfectly happy with that. You know, I'm not necessarily somebody who will go out of my way to optimize overall length, blade cutting edge to weight ratio. But for those of you who do, ooh, that's crispy. Definitely. That is the way to go. So anyways, like I said, we're looking at gray G10 here, but it did actually come with, I'll show you guys the box. Here's the, where it says TRM. I'm not sure why I'm showing that. But it also came with, I think, just an example of some other scales. Sorry, I should have had this opened up before I started the video. It did come with some red micarta scales. These are nice. I probably would opt for something like this. A quick search tells me that there are a lot of different configurations. I mean, in terms of like the scales, you can get different colors of G10, different colors of micarta. I love how this micarta looks. Let me see if I can set this down here. I have my camera set up to where it's finally capturing almost exactly what these knives look like in real life, right? So this gray is almost, it's a little bit lighter than what I'm seeing in real life. And same thing with the red, it's just a little bit lighter. But, oh boy, I love this look. This looks very nice to me. So you do have quite, now when they are in stock, as of the time of this video, what I'm seeing on their website is that they'll be available again mid-January, so any day now. So if you're watching this review and you're like, boy, I'd really like to get my hands on one, but they're out of stock on retailers, fear not. I believe there is another one coming. If you're watching this months or years into the future, and you know, then they may or may not be sold out. But I just wanted to give you guys an example there of some of the things that you can get. What we're looking at for blade steel on this guy, you can see right there, TRM USA 20 CV. These knives are made in the USA, for those of you who don't know. Let's talk about this excellent blade. There's a lot, perfection comes in many forms in my eyes, you know, when it comes to an EDC blade. Now, obviously, this blade is not going to do everything for everybody. But if you're looking for an EDC knife, you're trying to max out, you know, the amount of usable cutting edge and the performance of that cutting edge, right, for the weight and length, you know, for what you're carrying. It's really hard for me to argue anything against this blade shape. I mean, take a look at this. The flat runs 60% the length of the blade. There's nothing really to speak of in terms of strength here, right? But, I mean, if you're looking to just maximize performance for what you're carrying, this thing is like the laser beam of laser beams in terms of how thin it gets down there behind the edge. It really feels performance oriented. You can lock in here. Also, they've managed to knock down all these edges here so you're not getting any sharpness. The tumbling is nice. It's sort of that very fine grain structure tumbling, kind of almost like sand, right? I really, really like how that looks. It's not bead blasted. At least that's not what it looks like to me. It looks like very light tumbling, slight reflectivity. The edge is just fantastic. I mean, this thing is ready to go. You know, if you're, listen, if you're doing surgery on a grape every day, this is a good knife to do that with. But seriously though, if you are somebody who needs a very thin edge, you know, that's ground, you know, for slicing performance, you just, you know, you like not having a lot of hang up and drag. You don't want any unnecessary, you know, aesthetics or anything in your blade, and you just want something that's going to cut and cut efficiently. This is the way to go. It's ready to do that, you know? You got to cut deep into something that's very dense and make a cut. Well, you've got a nice long blade, nice puncture-oriented blade, and then your edge is nice and thin, and it's in a steel that is arguably one of the best steels for EDC out there, CPM 20 CV. The thumb studs do not have any texturing on there, but like I said earlier on in the video, it really doesn't need it because of where they're positioned. I can't emphasize enough the minimal effort it takes to deploy this. I mean, it just is ready to go. There doesn't need to be texturing. And the fact that there is not texturing in this case actually makes it to where if you like to sit around and just deploy your knife over and over and over again on your couch, there's really nothing to tear up your fingers. The thumb studs are nicely rounded off. They're nicely shaped. It's just a joy. It's an absolute joy. Let's take a look at the tools required to, or the heads required to disassemble. I'll go ahead and get out my handy dandy Weeabit selector and Weeabit driver, two extremely inexpensive items that you can find down in my description, as well as some of the more expensive high-end US production knives that I talk about every day, and some really awesome budget knives. There's also EDC gear down there. There's tons of stuff. Whatever your itch is, if you feel the need to scratch it, take a look at my description. I've got some of my favorite stuff down there, as well as just popular stuff over the last few years. So feel free to take a look there. I'm going to guess the handle screws are T6. That one was a little bit loose. It's probably a good thing I checked. Let's go ahead and tighten that guy down there. Yeah, that's going to be T6. Why don't we check the other one here, just for the next reviewers. Make sure everything's nice and tight so nothing flies apart while they're looking at it. Yeah, T6 there. You guys know how I feel about T6. I don't like it. I wish everything was T8. It's never a deal breaker, though. T8 heads, strip, and the bits sometimes are not the strongest either. The pivot here, yeah, that's a T8. So we got T8 pivot, and we've got T6 body screws. There is minimal hardware, so there's something to be said for that. That's nice. It shouldn't be super difficult to take apart. We have a very simple liner lock setup. G10, you know, everything's countersunk. Here's what I think is cool. You got two screws that hold on the scales, right? And then underneath are actually the screws for the standoffs. So you don't have a whole bunch of hardware sticking out on the outside. It's simply the pivot and the two T6 body screws. Now there are, you know, you're like, you just said it was minimal hardware and there's more hardware underneath. Yeah, that's true. Still though, I mean, in terms of taking this thing apart and putting it back together, it should be super easy. I do like that they hid the extra screws, and I like that there are 3 standoffs back here. I mean, I think they could have done fine with just 2, but it's a very thin knife. You know, all the materials are thin. The added integrity, the added structural integrity, or at least in my mind, the added structural integrity, I think with 3 standoffs here is welcome. We do have a truly deep carry pocket clip, and one that I very much like, you know, the design of. It does have a bill, but it doesn't stick up quite as much as like the bill on my Guardian Tactical Recon. You can see there's a little more room for something to get caught underneath that pocket clip, and it has, and lifted it out of my pocket actually. This is not so much the case here. You do have a couple of screws that are not completely, they're not recessed at all into the handle there, so I don't know. I mean, truthfully, in and out of the pocket, this thing doesn't seem to be fighting my jeans. So I think that's just about perfect. It's going to carry deep. It's a great, strong clip. It looks nice. It's not satin. It's actually tumbled, so that looks really good. On the other side, you have it's a non-adjustable side of the pivot. This is a super, super straightforward design, right? You can see the liner lock there looking like it's engaging at like 80%, but that's because of how thin the blade stock is, right? It is absolutely solid, up, down, left to right, like absolutely solid. It's always impressive, a knife that's this thin, right? And it's also centered. Just great, right? There's some super high demand for this knife right now, and it's completely understandable to me why. This knife is made in the USA. By the way, ergonomics are off the charts. I love designs like this where it's not really a forward choil. It's just sort of, the handle just turns into the blade and the blade curves down so you can choke up, but you're not like forced into this little area. Let me give you an example of what I'm saying here. The Spyderco Shaman is the same way. But let me show you an example of 2 other knives, right? One that does it right and one that doesn't do it quite right. Shaman's the same way. It just sort of curves down. I'd love to see more designs like this, right? The quiet carry, whatever that thing is kind of the same thing. Now, here's an example of a forward choil that kind of limits you, right? The non-flipper's not so much like this, but you can see here because of the flipper tab and this area right here, I'm limited to the space that I can get my finger in there, right? On these knives, I can run my finger as close as I want. I can go here, I can go here, 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 get right up next to that. Getting the full meat of my hand in there. With this knife, I want to get the meat of my hand in there. I'm kind of riding up there on the blade. So I really, really like that, especially in the case of the Spyderco Shaman. You get right up there and there's kind of a nub that keeps you back. But in any case, I like how knives like this do that. And this is great because it doesn't make the blade super tall, like so tall that it becomes a huge knife. But there's still plenty of room to drop down to a ridiculously thin cutting edge. So no matter where you're holding it, clear back here, right here, right here, there's plenty of freedom on the handle, and that just makes me happy. I love that. There's no jimping back here, but I think the lines of this knife do a good job locking you in. And by the way, you know, the scales are peel ply. It's extremely similar to the peel ply texturing that you would get on the Spyderco Para 3. We'll actually just compare them. They're both gray. They are almost identical in terms of texturing. The big difference there is the, I would say the amount of rounding in areas, you know, right here. Though on the TRM, right up here, it's, oops, sorry about my camera. Little teeny tiny bit sharp right there, right? I don't know that I'm going to say that that's really going to cause that much of a problem. Maybe if you're bearing down on it over time without gloves, okay. But everywhere else, it's nicely rounded. For whatever reason, it's really just here, 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 right there. And then people are like, oh, that's important. That's right where you put your fingers. In practice, it's really, it feels pointy to like the touch. But like in practice, when I'm gripping it, I really don't feel it. And for those of you wondering, no, the pocket clip's not really a hot spot. The biggest issue, I mean, really the only thing I'm going to complain about here is, it's got T6 body screws. The biggest issue is that it's not always available. This is a $200 knife when it is available. This knife is made in the United States. Truthfully, there are a lot of construction elements here that remind me of Spyderco, and out there, you know, just like with anything, you're going to hear people go, Spyderco knives are kind of, you know, like they're built really well, but sometimes I don't always agree with the price. I mean, okay, you know, maybe. Truthfully, you know, when I picked this up, it reminds me a lot of Spyderco. And with Spyderco, I mean, in terms of like the build quality, not in terms of the design. The design is its own thing, and it's a fantastic, fantastic design, right? But let me give you an example. Like up against the Benchmade, the Ritter Hogue, right? This is, we're looking at very similar materials, right? Both USA made. Well, M390 versus 20CV, it's the same thing. In the case of the TRM, you're looking at flat, you know, peel ply textured G10. You're looking at contour textured G10, countersunk steel liners. We got standoffs, right? We're looking at very similar amounts of materials and made in the United States. The biggest difference is this is a $200 knife. This is a $155 knife. Up to about 175, this is where I'm feeling that's kind of the cutoff here. I'm not sure what the extra 25 bucks in my mind is going towards. Like this feels like a $175 knife. I don't know what the extra $25 is going towards there, but the truth is that anybody who's willing to spend $200 on this knife is going to be very, very satisfied with it. I don't think you're going to blindly go after this knife. I mean, this knife has a lot of spotlight on it. It's very performance oriented, and it's a great knife. It's just a little bit high for me. You know, it's like, yeah, this is great. This is undeniably great. I mean, a nearly perfect design, right? Problem is that there's a lot of competition at 200 bucks, and just given the materials and the construction and the overall, you know, the end product, it is perfect. It's executed flawlessly. But so is the Ritter Hogue, right? And so is the like the Para 3. You know, you can get a lot of Spyderco Sprints in 20CV and G10 for between 140 and, well, 130 sometimes and 160. So there's just a lot of examples out there that tell me, like, I'm not 100% sure how they're getting up to 200, but that doesn't necessarily make this a bad knife. The frustrating part is that it's not always available, right? These are super sought after. You should be able to get them, like I said, here in mid-January or so. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead and recommend it. Despite it being a little bit high on price, you know, I can still understand, I can still see value here. So for those of you that have $200 to spend and you're looking for a hyper performance-oriented EDC knife with a very thin edge, it's put together well, solid, you know, something dependable, right? You're trying to max out those ratios, those perfect carry profile and weight ratios. Yeah, this is a fantastic use of that money. A little high, still a good use. So it is going to go on my most recommended knives of all time playlist. That's going to be pretty much it for today's review, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on this Metal Complex logo right here and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.